Today's webinar, we're going to be talking about staffing websites and some techniques that you can use to improve your website, improve the return on investment, get more clients, and particularly in today's market, get more candidates to contact you and apply to your jobs. Today I'm going to be joined by Caitlin Bowling and Mark Yelsavetsky. I think I just completely ran your name together. Sorry, Mark. Who are part of our creative team. And these guys do a lot of the really interesting work in mobile, in adding content and features to our sites, and thinking about new ways to help our clients better convey their value and better drive response. So I'm really excited for everybody in the audience to get to hear some of the latest and greatest things that they're doing in web design. So to kick things off, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. So first thing, just a quick take on the real value of a staffing website. We get a lot of people who come to us for websites for different reasons, and we're going to do a quick rundown of all the main goals of your site. Then we're going to tear apart what we see out in the industry. There are some really good staffing websites out there, and there's some that are not so really good. And so we'll talk about some of the most common problems we see, and you can sort of use this as a checklist to evaluate your own website. Most of our time today will be spent reviewing 11 ways to drive more ROI. These are going to be specific things that you can integrate with your current site that you may put into a new site to try to drive more response. They're not all just website changes. We're also going to be talking about changes in search engines, changes in pay-per-click advertising and social media to help you drive more response. And then as time permits, we will spend some at the end for Q&A. But as always, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please use the question window, and we'll do our best to try to integrate your questions into the presentation as we go. All right, so first topic, the value of a staffing website. What can and should your website be doing for you? Well, Mark and Caitlin, I've got a starter list of ideas that I'll run down, then I'll ask you guys to sort of share any additional thoughts that you might have. So to me, a website first and foremost is about positioning. It's sort of your director of first impression. So somebody sees your name, somebody sees your job posts, your salesperson makes a call, and before that prospect or candidate makes a decision about wanting to work with your company, they're going to go check out your website, and what they see controls their impression of your organization. So we have to make sure, obviously, that first impression conveys exactly the right value, and we're going to talk more about that later. Second thing is credibility. Staffing is such a competitive industry. We need to be able to prove our value, and in a very recent lunch with Haley, Scott Wintrip was with us, and he talked about staffing websites, and he talked about how staffing firms differentiate, and he said the most important thing that you can do to differentiate is have data that shows off your results, being able to show off your relevant experience so that the prospect, that the candidate knows you already understand what they do, you understand their hiring needs, and you're going to be able to provide the best possible solution because you're an expert in the staffing needs that they have. Third value of a website is lead generation. A lot of people think their website should be about mostly positioning and the messaging, but other people want it to be about lead generation for the sales team, lead generation for the recruiting team, and we're going to talk about some of the tools today, contact forms, chatbots, landing pages that can be integrated with your website to drive more inbound leads. I'm a big believer that your website should be your hardest working recruiter, 24/7 out there helping you attract candidates to your jobs, helping you encourage more candidates to apply, helping maximize the percentage of your jobs that are getting filled and getting them filled faster. Your website can also be used for direct selling, whether it's via skill marketing, promoting featured jobs, encouraging employers to request employees or request some sort of a consultation. It doesn't replace what your sales force does, but it can be used for direct sales in that someone would go from website to actually inquiring about a service or an individual they're looking to hire, a service they want to buy. The next value of your website is making your sales team more productive, because right now, if you think about selling staffing, you're probably selling to a company that already has multiple vendors. You're probably selling against 3 to 10 to 20 other competitors. And if you're a salesperson, it's really hard to stand out. So your website, if it's filled with awesome content and tools and resources that you can share with clients and prospects, gives your salesperson, your sales team, information that they can leverage in the sales process, either through follow-ups or prior to making a cold call, or even printing out and taking along with them for a drop-off. Helps them to make their sales calls more productive by getting to conversations that are about real business issues. And my last value of a staffing website is finding ways to enhance the service process. So whether that's through improving how it integrates with your ATS, adding additional resources to maybe make onboarding or other service experience elements easier, or extending your hours so that you can get feedback from clients and candidates, get requests for services more hours of the day. So that's my top list of the value of a staffing website and what it can do for your organization. But, Caitlin and Mark, I'd like to ask for your input. Caitlin, we'll start with you. What do you see when you're building sites as the most important value you're helping people to deliver?
Thanks, David. I'd first like to echo what you said about positioning. I think your website really, truly is a visual representation of your brand. So you want to make sure it portrays your company accurately. I also think that it can serve as a central hub for you and be complemented by all of your other marketing efforts. So what you're doing in social media or email marketing or direct mail or even in person can all lead potential leads back to your website. So if that website is organized and optimized well, it really has the power to work for you 24/7 and be your biggest lead source generation.
And I'd like to echo the positioning aspect of it, actually. I think that the first impression is very important. That's everything from the design of the page to the content on it to the functionality of it. That'll echo your positioning as a business, and it'll demonstrate to potential clients and candidates just how you operate. I think it can make or break a potential sale if somebody abandons it right away because the first impression isn't strong enough.
Yeah, and I know that's one of the things that we sort of harp on is, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, is when somebody comes to your website, they instantly need to know what you do and how you're different, so that they can make the determination, do I want to keep reading? So that positioning, I agree with both of you, is so critical. And I think the challenge to it is we have far less time than we think we do to get someone to want to continue to look at our site. We may think, hey, I'm going to write all this amazing copy that tells someone why I'm wonderful, but the reality is we've got 3 to 5 seconds to get their interest, which I guess brings us to our next slide. The top problems with staffing websites. So guys, take it away. Tell me what you think are the top issues you run into on these sites.
For one thing, sites become outdated. You don't want your site to last more than 3 to 5 years, and that's for a number of reasons. For one thing, your business changes. Your site can no longer reflect what you do or reflect it accurately, and that can change how you want to be seen. That goes to the information that's on the site, whether it's accurate or not, and that goes to services, locations, people, and additionally, technology changes. 3 to 5 years ago, responsive design was just brand new. And there are new formats happening all the time. That goes from mobile screen sizes all the way to super high definition TVs. We want to be able to compensate, design, and build for that.
Yeah, think about how many times just in the last few years we changed the infrastructure behind the scenes that we're building the sites on, and we look back at a site that may have been done just 2 years ago and said, wow, I can't believe we did it this way. It's changed so much. And for most of the people listening to the webinar today, you probably don't even think of that back end, but the technology is changing so quickly that even if you don't need a total rebuild in 3 years, it makes sense to look at how have things changed and do we have the best practices integrated with our site. So Caitlin, what's your top concern over staffing websites?
I think they're boring. At least some are, and some can be. I think we see a lot of sites that lack a lot of engaging visuals and graphics. They feature static layout and static content that never changes, so it really serves no purpose for a user to come back to visit your site. And lots of long copy also. Websites that read like novels don't perform well because you're not reading a novel and you don't have that long of a user's attention span. So really making them more exciting is important because your company is not boring. I don't think your website should be either.
Totally agree with that. All right, Mark, how about you? Another issue.
Well, for one thing, the 3-second rule is important. The way that technology is now, especially with social media and how we interact with the web, attention spans are super short, and we're goldfish. We get distracted by shiny things. So your website needs to tell me what you do and why I should be interested in 3 seconds or less. Get to the point.
I'm sorry, what were you saying? A text just came in. All right, Caitlin. Next issue you see.
No clear direction. So you want to think about the visitors on your site. They're there for a lot of different reasons. They might want to solve a problem. They might want to find more information. So your site should really provide a clear path for each type of visitor and let them know what they should do next.
And Mark?
Finally, lack of response. I mean, sometimes sites don't have an optimized way to get people to take action and the actions that you want them to take. If somebody's visiting your website, they potentially want to interact with you, be it filling out a form, signing up for a newsletter. But if they can't figure out how to do it, they're going to abandon it and probably not come back.
Yeah, it's funny. We were actually reviewing a website just this morning, and the site design itself was pretty nice, but then when we got down to the way to take action to apply to a job, they actually had a page you'd go to that still had the design of their last website because it was integrated with their ATS on a different URL, and they didn't know how to update it, and it was a really long form that wasn't mobile responsive. So this is a company trying to recruit nurses, and the probability of their being successful recruiting nurses with an outdated interface that wasn't mobile responsive, didn't matter how beautiful the site was, didn't matter how good the copy was, they weren't going to get the results because they designed the response mechanisms incorrectly. All right, so let's change gears. Let's focus on what do the best staffing websites do differently. And Mark, we're going to have you kick things off with the first lesson, which is on CTAs. What is a CTA?
Sure. Well, first off, a CTA is a call to action. It's basically a mechanism that directs people where you want them to go by giving them the path of least resistance to the action that you want them to take. The best websites have more calls to action, and we believe that you should have call to actions on every single page, at least one, but ideally 2 or 3. And you don't want a dead end by forcing someone to backtrack. So if there is no call to action on a page, they're not going to know what to do. They might go to the next page and find somewhere to go, but you don't want to bank on them having to find that for themselves. So when you're using multiple calls to action, you want to mix it up, use different styles. For one thing, the most simple is an inline, and that's really just a linked piece of text or an image right in the body.
So in the example you see on screen right now, we did it. The inline call to action they're buttons, but they're integrated with the body copy. So you see copy, an inline call to action, copy, an inline call to action. And Mark mentioned also they don't have to be buttons. They could just be hyperlinks or text you see the text that's underlined, that's linked. That works as well, but you want to incorporate those throughout the text. It also not only helps drive action, but it breaks up the copy to make it easier to read.
You're also going to want to use call to actions at the end of a page. We do this a lot in the footers of sites, and sometimes that's putting in a quick contact form or a sign up for our newsletter form like the example on the slide. Additionally, we put call to action banners at the end of blog posts that are relevant to the content. So for example, on the slide you can see the search job opportunities banner, and that was from a blog post for candidates who are looking for new jobs, tips to help them do better in interviews. And that was at the end of the post, and it took them right to the job board. Finally, you'll see this on a lot of sites that have multi-column layouts. Usually there's one big column for the body content and the actual content of the page, and then you'll have a smaller column for a sidebar. And here's where you can do a lot of different stuff, and that includes buttons to different pages, quick contact forms, some quick information. You can give them graphics, and so on. It's very versatile.
Another thing we see some companies doing in sidebars, you see it sort of in the bottom of the example here, is you can have a news feed from your blog, so you've got dynamic content. Also, if it's a page for employers, that's a place to skill market candidates. If it's a page for job seekers, that's a place to advertise a specific hot job or a category of jobs. So not only do we have buttons and links, but sort of as Mark was talking about, really relevant content that drives an immediate action. All right, Mark, I think we've got one more.
And then finally, we have fly-ins, and these you'll see on a lot of pages. They take all different forms, from taking up the full screen, that's what we call an interstitial, to a fly-in, and this will come in from the side of the page, bottom, top. It really doesn't matter where it comes from. But these, they usually have a little bit of a delay on them, so that once the entire page loads, there's something a little bit extra to grab your attention. And this usually is a very strong call to action. You want somebody to take the action right then and there. So it's a contact form, it's directing them right to a specific page, it's a sign-up form, something along those lines.
Thanks. I also know that some of our clients that have implemented these fly-ins, particularly ones to get people to submit a resume or apply to a job, have seen an increase in job applications of 50 to 70% or more in the number of candidates converting just by adding this feature to the homepage of their website or to the top of the employer's page. So fly-ins, you don't want them to be too intrusive, because if they're overly intrusive, people won't come back to the site. The example you see, it doesn't fly in over all of the copy on the page, just a little bit from the side so you know that it's there. Now, before we move on, we did have a question come in, and I'm not 100% sure I understand the question, but the question was about how do we handle phone calls to action that open a pop-up asking the user what program they want to use. Typically, we don't do phone calls to action ourselves on desktop, but we will do it on mobile, because now we can use a click-to-call function on your phone. So you don't have to have Skype or a ShoreTel application or some specific desktop application. Have you guys seen any other examples of click-to-call?
Yeah, this is actually becoming a lot more popular now, especially on Macs, because they're becoming so much more integrated between the iPhone and, let's say, a MacBook Pro. But this is really dependent on the operating system and the device and the software installed. So if, let's say, you have Skype installed on your Windows machine, a phone call link could open up Skype, and you can use that if you have the credit to call the number linked. But on a mobile device, an Android's going to handle it differently than an iPhone, and so on.
Thanks, Mark. All right, let's talk. We talked about having more calls to action. I also want to address the other side, having better calls to action. So giving people more reasons to respond. And if you think about all the reasons somebody might take action with you, it's not just because they want to hire a temp or they need a direct hire. It's not just because they're applying to a job. They may come to you because they want information about a specific topic. They may want to send you their resume even though it's not to a specific job, just to submit resume as opposed to apply to a job. Maybe you have some great content that's available to download that they can put in their email address to receive. Or maybe you have a monthly publication, a newsletter, or some sort of electronic magazine that they can opt into. Maybe on the job seeker side, you're offering job alerts or hot talent alerts on the employer side that they can opt into. Maybe you have a webinar you've done, like we're doing this today. We are recording this webinar, and it will be on our Lunch with Haley site next week so that people can come on demand, learn from your expertise. But now the call to action is to watch now or enter your email address to access our video library. And then we also see that having not just a Contact Us page, but a quick contact form on multiple pages or even in the footer of every page on the site will increase response. So think about all of the reasons that a client or a candidate might value your expertise, and then how do we turn that into calls to action on the website. We also want to give people more ways to respond. So the most common way to respond on a website is to fill out some sort of a form. But we're seeing a real rise in the use of chat, whether it's live chat or as if you've been to Haley Marketing's site recently, you'll see that we just installed a chat bot. Now it sort of looks like a live operator, but it's completely automated in a way to ask very simple questions, gather feedback, and then route, in our case, visitors to either our sales team or our support team. For a staffing company, this could route employers to your sales team, whereas candidates could be routed to your recruiters. And then the one we were just talking about is the call to action can be to make a call. And particularly on mobile, it makes a lot of sense. We were having the discussion with Stephanie in the audience. When people are on desktop, sometimes that's confusing because they may not have the software, but click to call on mobile is absolutely essential. And then also we want to make sure that the calls to action themselves are worded very well. We want strong copy that conveys value to the recipient. So here we have some fun copy from this organization to help you reach your peak. But if you think about wherever you have a call to action and you label a button, use a very intuitive label. Historically, most forums ended with a button that had the word submit. But if you really analyze the word submit, it's probably not what we're asking people to do. So instead, we want to think about what is the action we're asking someone to take? What is the benefit, the value we're delivering? Put that in the button, and it's much more likely to be clicked. Okay, now we're going to change gears, and we're going to talk about user experience. So, Caitlin, we're coming to you since you're our UI expert. How can staffing firms create a better user experience?
Thanks, David. So user experience is crucial for the overall success of your website. And a few ways to do this. One is definitely to make it more intuitive. Think of your different visitors and the actions you want them to take. The website navigation, the structure, and the calls to action on your page should allow each user to find what they're looking for quickly and easily. Next, you want to consider adding some elements, such as a large format dropdown. This is one example of navigation that makes it really easy for a user to quickly see all of the information contained within your site and get to anywhere in your site within one click. Additionally, you want to direct the reader's eye to where you want them to go. The design of your site should create a visual hierarchy of information as users scan the screen. You can use design elements like graphics or font size or color to help direct the reader's eye and promote your calls to action on that page. And lastly, one more, shorter forms. Forms on your website can be your biggest lead generation source, so you want to make sure they're optimized to convert well. Make your forms easy to fill out by keeping them concise and only require the fields that are absolutely necessary. Also consider using third-party services if they're available to help users complete forms with just one click. For example, sign up with Facebook or import from LinkedIn are all really easy ways to get your users to easily fill out a form without entering 25 different fields.
Yeah, thanks. And before we go too much further, one of the things I want to talk about in the shorter forms is the job application. So many staffing companies, particularly light industrial staffing companies, have a need to get a lot of information from candidates, sometimes who don't have a resume. So we have a desire to try to get as much of that data in one pass as we can and get it into the ATS. But there's sort of a rule of thumb with forms that every field after 3 will diminish the level of response. Now, I talked to some staffing companies that they say they've tested it, and they said, yeah, just 3 fields does maximize the number of respondents, but they like to ask a few more questions because that helps qualify, because it's not always just about pure quantity. So you want to experiment with the ways you're asking candidates to apply, saying what's the right amount to maximize the response, but still give us enough information to determine, are we interested in this candidate? We also think about breaking the apply process into 2 steps. Step 1 is get that basic information so we know this is a candidate we're interested in, and then follow up with the invitation to go complete your full application online. It adds a little more work to the application process, but right now when we're all starving for candidates, if we could get 10, 20, 30% more response to our jobs by not chasing people away, and we've seen some instances of as much as 85% of candidates abandoning application forms. If we can cut that back, you're going to fill more job orders.
And David, I just want to add, don't be afraid to play with the number of form fields that you have and experiment with that and see how it affects conversions and quantity versus quality.
Excellent, thanks. All right, Mark, I know you spend a lot of time, particularly in our email marketing, looking at mobile, so give us some advice on what staffing companies need to think about from making their sites mobile.
Sure. For the last few years, mobile has been essential. Mobile traffic is through the roof. And right now, Google's taking notice of that. they'll penalize you if your content's not mobile optimized. A couple of years ago, they introduced an update to their algorithm that had search results in mobile listed as mobile friendly. They dropped that tag, but that doesn't mean that their algorithm has changed. If you're searching Google from a mobile device and your content's not mobile friendly, simply put, it's not going to rank as well. And a lot of traffic comes from mobile. It's anywhere from 30% to 70% of job seeker traffic is done on a phone. That largely depends on the people that you're staffing, what the demographics are, but it varies a lot, and 30% at a minimum is a huge percentage. And more is less on, or less is more on a, sorry. Your mobile device, your mobile website should be a smaller version of your desktop site. Take a less is more approach to content. You can pare this down. Not all the information on your desktop site is going to be essential for mobile visitors. And you'll want to take advantage of smartphone features. They're called smartphones for a reason. They can add context to stuff where there wasn't context before. We used to have phone numbers as just text, but now cell phones can recognize that that is a phone number and automatically link that. So click to call is just one example of that. But also we can add easy navigation links. So if somebody wants to get to one of your offices, it's just a click and it can open up in Google Maps or Apple Maps and start navigation right away.
Yeah, and the example you see on screen here is a screenshot of the Panther Group's mobile website, and you see the bar across the bottom, which we've blown up so you can see it more clearly, where there's 4 calls to action that are anchored to the bottom of the cell phone screen to immediately initiate a call to this organization, to search their office locations, to search their jobs, or to open up their contact form. So whatever page you're on the site, we're giving you ways to navigate that are specifically designed to work well with your mobile phone. All right, well, let's talk about Google Analytics. Now, this is not going to be our whole workshop on analytics. I believe we have a recorded lunch with Haley, which you can watch if you want the deep dive into analytics. But it is really important to look at Google Analytics, and if you don't know how to do it, to get someone who does, to see what's happening with the traffic on our website. You want to know, how are people getting to our site? Are they coming directly to us? Are they coming from search engines? Are they being referred from other sites? We want to know the pages they visit most frequently. We tend to spend a lot of effort thinking about how to make our homepage beautiful, but very often it's usually the most popular entry point, but there's a lot of other entry points that may be a very close second or third. So we want to know which pages are people coming in on, and then which pages are they then going to. We also want to know where they leave the site. If they're leaving before they apply to a job or take some call to action, we need to make some changes to the site to keep them from leaving before they take action. We want to look at every one of the response forms and see what the conversion rate is. And if we see a form on one area of the site has a 2% conversion rate, on another area of the site has a 12% conversion rate, we want to compare the differences and see what can we do to boost the forms that aren't producing as well. And then we want to just simply say, where can we make site improvements? So some of the key statistics we'll look at in Google Analytics are the total traffic trends, comparing last month versus this month, last quarter versus this quarter, the same time period last year versus this year, because in staffing, traffic can be very seasonal. We almost always see a fairly steep decline in web traffic in the fourth quarter. Not hard to figure out why. People get into holiday mode and they're less thinking about job searching mode, so traffic declines. We've also seen a decline year over year because there's closer to full employment. So when more people are looking for jobs, there's more traffic on a staffing company's website. We've had a lot of clients who saw either flat traffic between 2015 and 2016 or a slight increase. But if you compared that with the average staffing site, which saw a 10 to 30% decline in traffic on the candidate side, staying flat was really good, and that's why we have to look at those trends. We also want to look at our traffic sources. I mentioned search, social, direct, referral, paid. Wherever you're spending time online promoting your firm, getting the name out there, you want to see, is that driving traffic to our business? So if our whole team's spending 20 hours a week on social media, how many people are coming to our site from social media? Is it generating the inbound traffic we wanted? We want to look at specific landing pages. Where are people going first? And then we want to look at the bounce rate on those pages. Bounce rate's the percentage of people who go to that page and don't go any further. So if we have a lot of people hitting a specific page, but that page has a huge bounce percentage, we got to change the content and the calls to action to get people to go deeper into the site. We want to look at exit pages where people are leaving. You can check that right in analytics. And then we want to look at conversion rates for every form, every call to action. And if you really want to get into advanced topics, you can do things like goal setting and UTM tracking, where you're tracking individual links and you're tracking goals of what happens when somebody comes into your site on page X. Do they end at page Y where we wanted them? What's the percentage of people who make it through the funnel? And we had a question come in about how do you find the exit pages in analytics, and you want to go to the behaviors section of analytics and look at, it will say, I believe exit pages is actually one of the menu options that you can click on to see the specific URLs of pages people are leaving on. And again, if you want the deeper dive on analytics, go to lunchwithhaley.com and check out our on-demand webinars. Another really important thing is to improve your messaging. So we talked about the importance of websites as a tool for positioning. We want to make sure that the website is telling a better story. I mean, ultimately in sales, in life, it's best story that wins. So does your website have a story that's engaging? Is it real? Does it not sound like every other staffing company saying our service is better? We want to make sure that we're being as compelling as we can, giving people reasons to want to work with you, showing off things like your speed, your expertise, your unique access to talent, how you can give them greater peace of mind that their job orders are going to be filled correctly, and if they need 10 people to show up, that 10 people show up. You want to demonstrate how your overall service experience is better or different. In other words, think about the person visiting your website. They just went to 6 other staffing company sites, and you're number 7. So how do you make your site stand out in their mind by being as compelling as possible in the story you're telling? You want to try to focus on the problems that your organization can solve. So if you're only talking about the services you deliver, that's not very compelling. That's not very interesting. You want to focus on the ways you can add value for your clients and candidates based on the problems they're having, the problems you know that you're really good at delivering. And it may be a hiring problem, or it may be a bigger business issue like, what's the implication of having unfilled jobs at their organization? Are goods not getting shipped? Are deadlines being missed? Are they losing competitive advantage in the marketplace? Are their costs spiraling out of sight because they're paying so much for overtime? Those are just some of the ways you can solve problems with staffing, and your website can show people how you can be a problem solver and not just a provider of temp help and direct hire services. The example on screen from Madison Resources, they provide funding and back office solutions to the staffing industry, but their website isn't about funding. It's about their value. We make staffing companies more profitable, which is much more compelling of a message, much more interesting than saying, hey, we provide money. We also want to look at ways to emphasize results. I mentioned earlier Scott Wintrip's input about staffing firms needing to show off the value they deliver, proof of value, the results they deliver for their clients. And that can be done through things like testimonials or case studies or performance metrics. I sort of want to turn this over to our creative team and say, okay, guys, there's such a marriage here between content and creativity. So what do you see as some best practices and how staffing companies can show off their results?
Yeah, so I think if you have some really great statistics, you should really show them off. And as far as graphics go, your eye is going to be visually drawn to any kind of graphics versus text and any kind of movement over anything static. So in this example that you see on screen that we did for Team 1 Medical, these are actually animated charts and graphics that show off some of their unique statistics. So some ideas to consider that we've highlighted for clients in terms of data: your interview to hire ratio, your client or candidate retention rate, the number of clients or candidates that you work with. Additionally, consider things like your high ratings and reviews on sites like Indeed or Glassdoor. We can display that really visually. Number of awards or recognitions that your company has earned. And also maybe a unique benefits package that you offer or hiring process that sets you apart. Consider representing that visually to really highlight it and prove your value.
Additionally, I'm sure there are companies out there that have heard that clients don't want to use staffing services. If you have good results, you can show how much better you are than the industry averages and convince those potential clients to go with you instead.
Yeah, a lot of people who participate in Innovero's Best of Staffing, one, to get their logos to use, but two, to show some of the specific net promoter results. Now, I will say that with a warning. If you're an expert at Net Promoter, you understand what a Net Promoter score means. So a score like a 75 is world class as a Net Promoter. But remember, your clients and your candidates may think 75 is like the average you got in school, and that's a C. So we want to think about, when we use metrics, how to use metrics that show off your credibility, show off your value, but also make sense to the person coming to your website. And then, as Caitlin suggested, not just to put the data there, but to make it visual and to add motion, add animation to it, to really make sure that it's eye and attention capturing. All right, I want to talk about jobs. And this is something that I'm still astonished to find staffing companies that don't post their jobs to their website, or don't post all their jobs. And I understand the reason why. Usually it's because some of the jobs are so transient that we don't have time to get them posted and get them up to the website before we need to have them filled. But jobs are usually the #1 source of content on a staffing company's website. More people are going to go to your jobs than anything else. So the more jobs you have, the more people you're going to attract. Jobs can also be optimized for search engines. So the more jobs you have, every job can be its own page of content optimized for SEO. So we want to find a way to post every open job, whether that's done manually by entering them into our website, or that's some sort of feed from our applicant tracking system. We want them all there. You may also want to include evergreen jobs. And if you've got a lot of jobs that you're always recruiting for, but maybe they're real short term to fill, or maybe you have a lot of jobs that have the exact same job title, we want to have these, we call them evergreen, meaning they're positions you always, forever need to fill. And we want to make sure they're always on the site. And this can be a problem if you're using a feed from an ATS. Some ATSs will only feed active job orders, so there's no way to enter an evergreen job. You really like your website to have a job board so that you can get the feed of the active job orders, but on top of that, enter the evergreen jobs into the job board. It's one of the reasons we built our job board software the way we did, is so we can feed all that job data in from the ATS, but a client could manually enter additional jobs in directly into the job board, so the most important roles never disappear from their website. This is another controversial topic, featuring pay rates. I know sometimes staffing jobs don't pay that well, but pay rates do two things for you. #1, they weed out people who wouldn't take the job because the pay is too low. And that's okay, because you don't really necessarily want them if you can't place them. But the other thing it does is jobs with pay rates have been shown to get 40% more applications than jobs without pay rates. So please, if you really want more response to your jobs, find a way to include the pay rate, or at least include a pay range, so you can say, hey, we're hiring for this job, and yeah, on the low end it's a minimum wage job, but it goes up to $12 an hour. That will attract more candidates to your openings. And if it's possible, even co-brand your jobs. You may work for some clients who are well-known brands. They're great employment brands. Sometimes you don't want to do this because the employer won't let you. Sometimes you may not want to do this because a competitor might know who your client is, although that one doesn't usually worry me very much. But if your client would be a great draw to your advertising, ask for permission to co-brand the job. So you're talking about, hey, we place people at ABC Manufacturing, and that ABC Manufacturing is something that candidates are searching for when they're looking for jobs. That will enable them to find the jobs on your website. All right, let's talk a little bit more about SEO. We talked about Google Analytics, but we want to talk about search engine optimization. And we're really both inside and outside your website, because SEO is both on-page, things you're doing within the website, and then it's external, things you're doing to bring people back to you. The few things we want to talk about today for SEO, and quick sidebar, Our next lunch with Haley and our May product demo are going to be on SEO. So we're going to do a full hour on SEO services, and then we'll do a separate webinar where we show you what we do for SEO. But the points we want to make today is, number one, the rules have really changed. The way SEO works today is not the way it worked a couple of years ago. It's not the way it worked last year, and with Google, it's not exactly the way it worked last month. Google changes their algorithms all the time. Now, they don't tell you what they're going to do, but people who work and breathe in the land of SEO are constantly studying this to know what's really more important. And what Google wants SEO to be all about is content. In their world, they love SEO to be about nothing more than great content and your website being recognized as a leading authority for some specific topic. It could be temporary help for IT professionals in your marketplace. It could be career advancement opportunities for accounting and financial professionals in Southern California. You just want to think about the geography, the industry, and the areas of expertise that you want to be known for, and make sure your website is filled with that kind of content. And when it comes to content, it's really simple. More is better, and we have yet to find a place where there's such a thing as too much content. The last couple of summers, we have done a summer blogging challenge where we asked our team to all get really involved in blog writing, and we set a goal of writing 90 or more blog posts in 90 days. We expected to see a point at which more posts didn't generate more web traffic. Well, we never found that point. So if possible, encourage everybody in your team to be adding blog posts. Get every job onto your website. The more content you add, the more you'll show up for different searches that people are doing. Now, this can be tough with the next goal, which is to be original. We had a client who had what looked like a beautiful blog. They had 500 or 600 really good posts. But then we found out what they were doing is going to other websites and cutting and pasting articles from other websites into their own blog. That happens to be a copyright violation, and this poor company was not only doing this, but they were doing it from big name websites. And those big name websites have big name attorneys. So that's how we found out, is one of those big name attorneys called us and said, you have 24 hours to get this content off the site or we're going to be suing you. So don't copy other people's content. But if you see something great, doesn't mean you can't comment on it. It doesn't mean you can't share a link to it and then talk about how valuable this topic is to your audience. The more you can take a topic and make it specific to your clients and your candidates, make it relevant to them, that is original content. So you don't have to be a brilliant writer. You just have to be a good reporter and good at analyzing information and being a consultant to your clients and candidates and how you share information. And then there's all the tech issues. Mark mentioned mobile. Content has to be mobile optimized. Speed is especially important for SEO these days. There are a lot of trends we're seeing in simplifying page design. Again, next month we'll get into all the technical details, and I'm not going to pretend to be our SEO expert. But there are a number of technical considerations that come into play in terms of optimizing sites. So, Caitlin, Mark, what are some of your views on what you see our clients attempting to do for search engine optimization?
One thing that we're seeing a good amount of right now is, especially if you have multiple office locations, local office pages are good to help you own a market. They provide specific information about that area and can be found in searches much easier if somebody's looking for a job in a town or a city.
David mentioned content and how important that is, and one type of content that we have added to our client sites is case studies, and we touched on it a little before, but you can list your services or your benefits, but when you really have a case study of a specific industry that proves that you solved a problem, it's much more impactful. And a case study in particular helps with SEO because it adds specific content about one type of service in one industry. Some technical information behind how we do case studies at Haley Marketing, we build them with what's called a custom post type in WordPress. And that custom post type lets you add case studies like you would posts or pages. And it lets you have unique pages for each case study, while also giving us the ability to categorize them and feed them throughout the site.
Yeah, I love the idea of case studies. One of the challenges I know a lot of staffing companies have is collecting response data from their clients and really figuring out the value of your services. But if there's a way to go into a client at the beginning of your service agreement with them and say, hey, what problem are we helping you solve? And then go back 3 months, 6 months, a year later and say, let's take a look at how have we impacted that problem, whether it was turnover or it was productivity or it was just worker quality, and document that. Simply gathering that data is going to differentiate you from many of your competitors. And then as Caitlin said, if you can create a categorized case study, add it to your website, you then can show the next employer, we've done something like your challenge specifically for an organization like yours before. And that's what an employer really wants to know is, do you know how to solve my problem? And case studies are the best way to prove it. Okay, thanks guys. Let's move on now from search engine optimization to pay-per-click advertising. So PPC, one of the simple things to do is to try to buy your way to the top of search results. Maybe I can't be number one for a specific search in my market, but with PPC I can buy keywords that people are searching and get my name right to the top of the search results for that page. If you're using it for recruiting, PPC can be great because we're finding it's fairly easy to get candidates to respond to paid advertising. It's a little more challenging on the employer side, so we have to be very careful about thinking about what types of information would people be searching for. They may not be searching for a staffing company or a recruiting firm in your market, but maybe they're searching for answers to a problem about how do I hire, how do I manage the cost of employment, how do we deal with the changes in the Affordable Care Act? And you can actually use that content in conjunction with PPC to do advertising to bring people back to your website to engage with your ideas. But pay-per-click advertising isn't limited to search engines. You can also use it very effectively on social media. Use it to get in front of the right audience, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. We can target using demographics, using behaviors to figure out who do we want to show our ads to, and the more specifically we target an audience, the more cost effective it is for our marketing. And we're seeing a lot of our clients right now are getting dramatic results on Facebook by doing targeted promotion of their blog posts to relevant audiences and targeted promotion of job openings to people who might be interested in those types of jobs. What I really love about paid advertising, and particularly the social paid, is just how accurately we can do that targeting. So I mentioned that you can do it in terms of demographics. I mentioned you can do it in terms of the past behavior, like websites they visited or other pages they visited. But you can even target people who are in your ATS. So let's say you have an applicant tracking system with 100,000 candidates in it. Well, you can export an email list of all those candidates and then upload that list to Facebook or into Google and target your advertising to people you used to have a relationship with. It's a phenomenal way to re-engage candidates, to bring them back in so that you have an opportunity to place them again, and also to ask those candidates for referrals, to build your referral bonus programs. And the reason that going after the repeat visitor is so important is we've done some studying on analytics for many of our clients, and we've learned that somebody coming back to your website is twice as likely to take an action as a first-time visitor. So from a best practice standpoint, one of our tips here is to make sure you're giving people reasons to come back time and time again. So just like we're doing today, our clients that do webinars are very effective at bringing an audience back to their website month in and month out. And the example you see here is an HR hotspot webinar from one of our clients. They'll get anywhere from a small audience of 30 or 40 people to as many as 500 different clients that will sign up to attend a webinar, and that brings all those people back to engage with this company's ideas, and it brings them back to their website to sign up for the webinar, to get the recording of the webinar, to download the slides. It creates a lot more engagement from their clients and their candidates with their website than if they didn't have a webinar series. Now, webinars are just one form of content. Many of our clients will use, as part of our Haley Mail service, they'll use the staffing and candidate resource centers. And if you don't have Haley Mail, you can use your own content or even your blogs as a way to create very rich categorized content that gives people a reason to come back. So on screen you see an example of a website that's got a whole section on employment law, on hiring process improvement ideas, on tips on being a more effective business leader, ideas for motivation and retention, fundamentals of staffing and working with staffing services. In the tools section are forms and sample documents that you can use to pattern your own policies after that are all included in the content these companies offer on their site. This rich content, it allows the employer to have a reason to come back, or the job seeker, but also your salespeople can use it in their follow-up to send a link back to the content in your website in any of their follow-up emails or voicemails, encouraging people to interact with you in more ways and more places. You can also attract people back to your website through remarketing. So remarketing happens when we track someone who's come to a website, and then we set up advertising to follow them around. Now, that advertising might follow them around Google. That advertising might follow them around social media. But the idea is that we want our firm's message to go where our clients and candidates are going, and that's remarketing. It's a really low-cost way to stay top of mind. The cost per impression on somebody is usually a fraction of a penny per impression, and even when you're trying to drive direct response, the cost per response is typically far less than the cost of a sales call or having a recruiter direct recruit an individual. You can also look at marketing automation, and that's a way to track visitors to your website so that when they fill out a form, we now can enter them into a marketing automation system that can automatically follow up with emails, that can track those people when they come back to your website, and when the system, the marketing automation system, sees that the individual has been to your website 2, 3, 4, 5 times, sees that they've been to certain pages, it can even notify your sales team or your recruiters when it's time to follow up. And I mentioned email marketing, but there's probably no better way to re-engage people you have a relationship with than email. Todd on our team did a HailEmail demo a couple weeks ago, and he talked about email as being the highest ROI method of communication, and that's because people who know you are likely to read your emails, and if your emails are driving people back to your website, that gives them more opportunity to apply to your jobs, to interact with your top talent if they're interested in hiring, to contact you about your services, to visit the direction information or the phone number for a local office. So email is an ideal way to drive more web traffic and get more repeat visitors who are more likely to take action. Next up, let's talk about social media briefly. So social is really about sharing more content to drive more traffic from social media to your site. If you're doing a good job of writing blog posts, adding jobs, adding other forms of content, webinars or articles, newsletter archives, if you're adding content to your website, don't just let it sit there like a library shelf. What you want to do is push it out to where your clients and candidates are hanging out, and for most of them, they're hanging out on social media multiple times every single day. So we want to get more content from the website shared in social media, and we want to get everybody in the team involved in sharing. Everybody in the team should spend 15 to 20 minutes every single day building their social networks, sharing content. And the intent of doing this activity is to build your employment brand, to build your staffing company brand, but the real focus is to get people from social media back to your website. So if everybody in your team's on social media, but they're only sharing articles from other websites, well, you're doing a great job helping out those other websites, but you're not bringing people back to your website where you can drive the ROI. So teach your team how to take content from your site and share it socially, and literally it takes minutes a day. All right, and I think we're up to our last tip. So Mark, we're going to turn to one of your areas of expertise, landing pages.
Sure, thanks, David. So landing pages are simple. They're supposed to have one action. You want to drive people, especially from ads. If a remarketing ad is following somebody around, they might click on it, and you want to take them to a specialized area of your site where they can take the action that you want them to take. Like I mentioned earlier, people have super short attention spans now, and you want to make it easy for them to reach the goal that you're setting, be it filling out a form, going to a certain page, or calling you. You want to make it as easy as possible. Additionally, you then want to treat each blog post as a landing page. You're putting a lot of content on your site. How will you get it to convert? This means strong copy, a call to action banner at the end, links throughout the text. You want to make it obvious where you want people to go after they're done reading it. And then you're going to want to test. Landing pages are made for A/B testing. You can test the copy, the colors, the images, the form prompts, the number of fields. Just test everything. You don't know if something works until you actually try it. And you can test shorter forms too. For example, if you need somebody to sign up for your mailing list, make it as easy as possible. Use one field, get their email address, and that's their permission. And get their permission, and you can send to them.
So Mark, I know we've been doing a lot of testing with our own landing pages. And I know it can seem overwhelming when you say test every element, but what have you been testing for us that have been some of the most important tests?
For example, we just did a landing page where one version had a video on it and the other did not, and that was the only change to the landing page. We've done copy tests where a headline changes from one version to another. We've changed the form types, whether it follows you, it stays fixed and follows you on the page, or pops out as a modal. But you don't want to test too much at once. You want to limit the number of variables that you have, because if you have a drastic change, you want to be able to attribute it to something and then carry that through going forward.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, well, Mark, Caitlin, thank you very much. That actually brings us up to the Q&A section. So we have a few minutes left, and we have had a couple of questions come in while we were chatting. I'll take the first one here, which is, how do you get your staff to share content from your website? So big stick works, but the better answer is to make it easier for them to do it. So I know, guys, when you design websites, you try to make social sharing as easy as possible. How do you do that?
I can take this one to start. One of the things we do, especially on blogs, is that there is a lot of meta information, especially that Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn use. And that includes automatically pulling in the title, maybe a short description, a featured image. So if you share the link, Facebook can pull all that information in right away, and you don't have to add any additional copy on your own.
You can also make use of some plugins to put the sharing icons directly on your site's content, whether it be a page or a post on your site, that make it really easy to share with one click.
Yeah, I think those one-click shares, so if you look at your own website and you've got content you want people sharing, is there a way that they can share with one click? I know a lot of our social media team also uses third-party tools. We are big proponents of Buffer app as a way to share, because we can control what URLs we're sharing and the times of day we're sharing and really make it very simple to share. But Amanda, to your question, the last thing we want to do is make sure that it's actually a defined goal, so that everybody on the team knows what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and how much they're supposed to do, and it becomes measurable. You know, did you spend 15 minutes today doing social media? Report back on the activities. You can see the results by looking at Google Analytics or looking at some of the social analytics to say how much traffic did that activity for our team drive to our website. How many more followers did we get? Are we getting engagement with the content? But the short answer to your question was, find ways to make it easier. Easier on your website, easier in your process by giving them tools and making your website designed to be as efficient as possible. All right, next question is about design, and it's one that we have a lot of clients ask us. We see a lot of websites now with tall pages. We see some websites without tall pages. From the design format, is there something we see that's really a best practice in maximizing ROI?
Good question. I think that tall pages have definitely taken over in the last few years. I think there's kind of a shift in the other direction happening right now. A little more simple, a little more straightforward and to the point, easy to digest content. I don't know if either of the two result in better ROI. I think it depends on the content you're trying to present. I think users are used to long pages, and it's kind of nice to be able to see everything on one page without having to navigate to multiple pages. You can get a brief overview of a lot of different sections of the site by just scrolling down, which users are used to doing. At the same time, I think simple pages that have limited calls to action serve a good purpose to drive action to one specific point of your site, if that's what that page is intended to do.
Additionally, you can go into Google Analytics and you can see what kind of devices your users are using, and that can help you maximize ROI by designing to those devices. One thing that we see a lot in creative, we use iMacs with giant screens, but the most popular screen size right now is only 768 pixels tall. So that's something that we have to compensate for when we design. And you just want to make sure that the majority of your users can see what you're designing and what your website's doing.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well, I'd love to stick around and answer more questions, and if people do have questions coming in after we end, we will keep the webinar open a little bit longer to answer, which we'll do via the chat window. But before we wrap up today, just want to let everybody know that we've got 2 webinars coming up very shortly. So I hope you will join us on Thursday, May 11th for the SEO strategies and tactics webinar that I mentioned. Dan and Brad from our team, who are our SEO gurus, are going to be talking about everything that is new and different and best practice in the world of SEO for staffing and recruiting firms. And then a couple weeks later, we'll be doing a specific product demo showing some of the things we're doing for on-page SEO and to drive inbound links for our clients to help maximize their response from their search engine optimization efforts. And for the 3 of us, thank you very much for being part of today's Lunch with Haley.